I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Well, Tony, I'm so glad you asked.
Hmm.
It's not quite like as always because I was not here over the weekend. I
Yeah.
was busy attending to family stuff down in Kentucky. That sounds
You're
bad.
from
I was. That sounds bad. Like something bad had happened. No, I just went to a figure skating competition. My daughter was in, and so I missed the scrimmage on Saturday. So back now. So don't worry, I'm fine. And you have also been marked safe from Kevin Noon. He's not here today. So a great day all around, I would say. I did on my way back, Tony. I was thinking of you because we were driving back from Kentucky, and at the time, we left the place in Western Kentucky about the time that the Elite Eight game between San Diego State and Creighton was starting. Now, as longtime listeners to the show will know, I am constantly trying to get Tony to stop and do fun stuff as we're traveling from one place to another. And Tony is constantly the buzzkill who's like, no, I don't want to. No, I hate fun. You know what's the worst? Having a good time. So mercifully, I was not with Tony this time. And we looked and we went, well, we could just about make it to Louisville in time to watch some of the second half of this Elite Eight game and probably get tickets pretty darn cheap. And so we did. And we bought tickets for $11 each. And we saw the end of an incredibly entertaining basketball game. And then my kids got to go down next to the floor and watch them cut the nets down and get confetti and all sorts of stuff. It was a really fun time. I'm so glad you weren't there to ruin it.
How much did you pay for the shirt?
The tickets were $11 each. $11 each. Pretty good, huh?
The shirt? The T-shirt?
So, funny story. We were, you go to one of these games. It's like, well, I'm going to let my kids get something if they want to get something to remember the fun game by. This is a fun thing we did. And, the merchandise is all priced at normal, ridiculous stadium rates. And I said, you guys can get whatever you want. Pick whatever shirt you want. It's fine. No big deal. And my son wanted one of the, hot off the presses San Diego State Final Four shirts. Sure, no problem. And they are just actively pulling them out of boxes. They're not hanging on the wall with the prices. And so I just hand the guy the card and one of these, and he goes $50. And I said, what now? Tell me about it, sir. I am familiar with inflation, but please, sir.
You know it's bad when they don't put the prices on it.
They were just pulling them out of the boxes, so it was fine. The one T-shirt cost more than 4 tickets to the Elite Eight, so it was fine. It all worked out. Everyone had a great time.
Back to the start of the show, because I thought what you were going to say when you were saying, I was in Kentucky for some family things. Don't worry, I'm not from Kentucky. That's where I thought you were going.
Yes. Also true. Yes.
So here we are at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Just got done watching. We watched 30 minutes of practice at the start of practice. Then talked to Jim Knowles, talked to Brian Hartline. Pretty full day. Now you finally got to take some pictures because there were no photos, no videos on Saturday. As you said, you weren't here. I tell you what, after being spoiled with the full practice, this kind of stuff not for me anymore. This is boring.
See, I like the spring practices because the sunlight on sunny days, the sunlight comes diagonally through the windows at the top of the field, and you get this one spot where it looks like God himself is reaching down and touching individual football players and blessing them with this glowing, shiny light, and so you get these incredible pictures. But yeah, it was, and we got this is one of these things where this is like a little bit of a check-in. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, we'll have a full practice again on Saturday for Student Appreciation Day. This is just a little bit of a check-in. Okay, you went through the scrimmage on Saturday. What has changed now? Because this is just like you're kind of taking the temperature throughout the spring. What's changed? Who was with the 3s before and is now with the 2s? Who was with the 2s now with the 1s? Whatever. So this is just kind of like a good kind of okay, let's see where things are now.
Yeah, and based on what I saw, I don't know that necessarily anything has changed from what we saw on Saturday, what we've seen before. The ones with the offensive line, again, what we saw. Mm-hmm. It was still, I'm going to do this, Josh Fryer, Donovan Jackson,
Carson
Hinsman, Matt Jones, and then Zen Mahalski. And then Taker Shabola is battling him for that for that right tackle spot. Now, they both played with the ones on Saturday, so I'm going to assume they both shared one time as well today. Defensively, everything is pretty much the same from what we saw on Saturday. What did happen on Saturday, though, was Carnell Tate had his black stripe removed. Davison Igbinosin had his black stripe removed. I asked Brian Hartline what went into the decision to remove the stripe from Carnell Tate, and he just said, like, he's done everything right. He's gotten straight A's. Like, everything he's done since he's gotten here, he's been spot on. And I asked him, has anything he's done been a surprise? It's like, you don't want to be surprised by it, but it's certainly ahead of what he thought he was going to do. So that's a pretty good sign. He was playing X on Saturday and made some plays and certainly looks the part. And I think it was maybe Jordan Kapler asking how the black stripe draft went. I guess, yeah, Carnell Tate was my second choice. I got him in the second round. I had completely forgotten about that. This is totally inappropriate, but I did see, saw some Jermaine Matthews, out there as well, and he's working hard. Still has the black stripe.
Still does have the black stripe. Yes, he was my first pick overall. We're out there working with the twos at this point, right? He's out there with Davis Nigbenos, and so, he's already repping ahead of some people who
threes and twos because
a little bit of a mixture, but yeah, but he's in there, and there were a couple times where he's not doing everything right just yet, and Jim Knowles is letting him know that he's not doing everything right just yet. But the portion of practice we got to watch was the defensive backs were working on an interception return drill. It's basically setting up the interception return. That one of the corners goes back, high points the ball, and then you set up the return. They always set up the return to the sideline, so you have guys coming behind you. And there's one where he didn't get back far enough, fast enough, and Jim Knowles let him know, hey, friend, let's do that again. And then he did, and then it was fine.
Well, and then the next one, the throw goes to completely the opposite side of the field of Matthews, and he's like not running full speed to go block because there's nobody there. One, there's no one to block. Or two, you're never going to make it over there in time. And then C.J. Barnett comes up running behind. Jermaine Matthews is not running. Jermaine Matthews, like, telling on him. But that's freshman in the spring. I mean, he's going to be fine. This is more me making fun of Tom.
Yes, exactly. And one thing that I will say a positive thing about Carnell Tate, which even though it sort of indirectly reflects positively on you,
directly.
Brian Hartline was talking about how many receivers are sort of in the circle of trust right now. I don't remember what the exact term was. It was basically like how many guys are game ready essentially, and he said 6 or 7 wide receivers are sort of game ready. And you sort of start counting yourself, counting off your, okay, you've got the 3 starters, that they're in that group. You certainly would assume Jaden Ballard's in that group. You would certainly assume that Xavier Johnson's in that group. And then it's like, and then is Carnell Tate number 6? Is Carnell Tate number... I mean, it feels like, boy, this would be really early for him to consider him game ready. But also, Hartline talked about the fact that when he would have anticipated Carnell Tate maybe losing his black stripe sometime in the summer, middle to the end of the summer, maybe a little bit of fall camp. And here he is. That was after spring practice number 5, a third of the way through spring ball. And you went back and looked at, the history of wide receivers or players who had lost their stripes that early, and it's like, this is pretty good company to be in.
Well, and because I was trying to find out the practice schedule of 2020, looking online, see if we had it anywhere. Because remember, they had 2 spring practices, and then things shut down. And then
really? Why was that? I don't remember.
It was a gas leak.
Oh.
Global gas leak. And then, you go back into fall practice, like 5 days after it was announced that football was back, Jackson Smith-Njigba lost his black stripe. So I don't know, is that 3 practices in there in that time, along with the 2 in the spring, but 5 spring practices beats any freshman regardless of position. I think Tommy Togiai, Austin Mack was the first, and then Tommy Togiai in terms of true freshmen in the spring. But certainly exceeding, I think you have to say exceeding expectations. And the question was, do you see being deeper this year, playing more guys? And that's when he said 6 to 7. Because I don't think he's game ready yet, but like he foresees this. Jaden Ballard is another topic of discussion. A guy who I think Brian Hartline said, he would have liked for him to be where he is now, like 6 months ago, or like last year. But he's here now, and the path is what the path is, and everybody has their own path. But he's expecting him to be, because the thing that I liked about him on Saturday was he was catching short stuff, being used on short routes, quick routes, and then also had a huge deep catch. But it's going to be the other stuff other than the deep route that gets him on the field. And he's like, you have to be complete if you're going to start at Ohio State. You can play without being a complete, but if you're going to start and then go to the NFL, you have to do everything, and he's on his way.
And Sue would like us to be a little louder,
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna move some stuff out of the way so we can be a little closer.
Sorry, Sue.
Sorry, the volume's a little low. This is one of these things where all these positions, they want you to be well-rounded. They want you, you have to be able to, you can't just be the guy who does the one thing, because if you're the guy that does the one thing, guess what? The other team does film study, and eventually they will figure out you're the guy who does the one thing, and guess what? They're going to start defending that, and you get very easy to defend if you're predictable. So you've got to be able to do a little bit of everything. And we've talked a whole bunch about cross-training guys where you can play inside, you can play outside, you can play, and you've got to be able to block, and you've got to, all the different stuff you've got to be able to do in order to get on the field. That's just, this is the really not sexy part of the whole process, where it's like, well, this guy was a 5-star, why isn't he playing? Well, he doesn't block well enough. And it's like, well, but he can do all the other stuff. Well, you have to run the football, and that involves all, the other 10 guys all blocking, and so then you have to be able to do that stuff. Christian just asked, when's the next scrimmage? The next scrimmage is, well, sort of Saturday.
Yeah.
It's the student appreciation scrimmage practice is Saturday, which is, it's sort of scrimmagey, but it's not, and they're certainly not showing as much as they do during, for example, during a closed scrimmage last weekend, because there are, 5,000 students here or whatever the number is, and they all have their cell phones, and and it's just, they're just kind of.
They may try saying, "Hey, please, no photo," but it never works.
Yeah,
and
right.
I think they probably stopped trying to say that, because it's just it's impossible.
You know what they should do? They should show them a picture of like a 1960s football game and say, "Look at this! Everyone just living in the moment, not a cell phone in sight," and that might,
True.
guilt trip the people into maybe.
Just experience it with your own eyes. But no, Heartline did say that the 4, 5, and 6 are much better than it was last year. We're talking about the 6, 7. So, because Jaden Ballard didn't play much last year as one of those 4, 5, 6. Asked about Xavier Johnson, he said he's a very good wide receiver and a very good running back, and you got to figure out how to best use those traits. And it almost feels like they could go back to some of the 2016 and the Urban Meyer play stuff with like the Curtis Samuel, because you have Xavier Johnson, you've got Caleb Brown, Evan Pryor, even Brandon Ennis. These are guys that I think you can use in different ways, more than just how they use Jackson Smith and Jigba as a slot receiver, Garrett Wilson as a slot receiver. I think there's some rush plays that they can use that still count as pass yards for Kyle McCord or Devin Brown.
Yeah, and this is a team that recruits an incredible amount of talent. Brian Hartline and the wide receiver room it's just every year, it's just, here's 4 guys from the top 100, and then there's 4 guys from the top 100 in the previous year, and there's 4 guys from the top 100 in the previous year, and there are only so many reps to go around with, at wide receiver. And so you're just trying to find different ways to get guys involved. And sometimes that's on special teams, and sometimes you want to get guys touches, and you have guys with different skill sets. And you've got the little short, shifty guy who is not necessarily going to be the guy you're throwing a jump ball to in the end zone, but you can use it, get him in space and have him, I sort of view that as the Evan Pryor role in the running back room. It's like maybe he's the third down back kind of guy this year, because, Mayan Williams has a tremendous skill set. Chip Trainum has a great skill set, but Chip Trainum is probably better at being the inside goal line running back, or Mayan Williams in that role, rather than Evan Pryor. It's just, you're not recruiting just carbon copies of guys. It's, you get different skill sets, and then you can take advantage of them if you're creative.
Travion Henderson plays on the team too.
Who? Oh yes, the
amount of offensive weapons, and we're not even really talking about Marvin Harrison and Emeka Ibuka and Julian Fleming at this point. And I would also say, if they are able to keep Jeremiah Smith in the 2024 class and land Mylan Graham, who is like one of the fastest dudes you've ever seen at receiver, it's just going to go on and on. 2025, there's a guy named Bo Jackson in Ohio.
There is. He's a running back, but man,
yeah, but
we saw him. Yeah, we saw him play at a camp last fall. Summer. He was at the 7-on-7 camp. He and his team were here, and they threw him in coverage against, I don't remember which wide receiver it was, but it was like one of the wide receivers that we were here watching. It was not just some random high school kid. It was one of the guys that we had on our list of here's the people to watch for, and he jumped a route and he either knocked it down or picked it off, and it was just kind of like, oh, this kid can kind of just do it all. So he's at I think he's Villa Angela St. Joseph up near Cleveland, if I remember correctly.
You might be right.
Yeah.
But can we move to defense now?
Sure.
Do you have anything to say about the defense?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank everyone for joining us and to say.
I would also.
I've seen we've got some questions. We'll get to those in a little bit. Do us a favor, hit the thumbs up if you're watching this live, or even if you're watching this later. That does help the magical YouTube algorithm. I don't know. It's something. It's basically like subscribing to Twitter Blue, is my understanding. If you guys hit the thumbs up, that's basically the equivalent of us subscribing to Twitter Blue. So
there you go.
Then our YouTube will still work. So that'll be great.
It's a lot of tubes, Tom. Sonny Styles was a topic of conversation, as you might suspect, with Jim Knowles. And right now he's behind Lathan Ransom at strong safety, and I don't think that's going to change. So it becomes about finding ways to use him. But what Knowles said is, like, first, that number 2 guy, Sonny Styles, has to compete for that job with Lathan Ransom. Like, there has to be a competition there. You have to show that you're good enough to play, and so he battles with that number 1 guy. But also, I'm not going to cuss here, Tom, but one of the things that Jim Knowles said about the young guys, you've got to kick A with the 2s. Like, so you've got to be the best of the 2s to show that, okay, now you should be playing with the 1s. And so they're making that process. And I asked him, is spring enough time for you to figure out what you want to do and how exactly you want to use Sonny? He's like, no. Especially once you get into game planning, from week to week, they're going to find different ways to use them. But like I said, on Saturday, they were doing some inside drills, and he was not the rush end, but like a Sam on the line of scrimmage. And then later on, he's a deep safety, still the strong safety, but the way the offense shifts, he's the last line of defense. And I think that's where you're going to see him from point A to point C and everywhere in between this year. And he did say that he thinks Ransom and Sonny can coexist. You just have to figure out how best to do that and figure out what Sonny does best.
And before we dive into this, I did want to touch on, you call it the strong safety, just so we're got our nomenclature straight. It is the traditional strong safety position, which Ohio State views as the boundary safety position and actually calls the bandit. You'll hear us use these terms basically interchangeably. I just feel like periodically we just need to sort of define our terms. The free safety is the deep safety, which is the adjuster. And then
what's the nickel called?
That's just nickel.
Just nickel.
Yes, he's the 5th defensive back.
Tanner McAllister last year, the nickel. This year, right now, Cameron Martinez and Jahad Carter, 1 and 2, so far.
5 piece for a quarter. That's that's why they call it the nickel. Anyway,
I never, I was thinking, of course.
Anyway,
of course, Tom.
Yeah. So, as far as Sonny Styles goes, he just. Every time we hear people talk about him, he reminds me more of Isaiah Simmons, the old Clemson defensive back / linebacker / whatever, just kind of like Swiss Army knife. Where what position does he play? And the answer is kind of yes, he does.
Like a rover,
just a little bit of everything. And this is the goal that Jim Knowles has, is to make the defense confusing for the opposing team, without making it confusing for his team. And if you have, you're disguising coverages, you're mixing up, sometimes you're pre-rotating, sometimes you're not, sometimes you're just, we saw today when they were doing the interception drill, the defensive ends were always dropping. They were always doing like a zone blitz where 3 guys are coming and maybe a linebacker was coming, but JT Tuimoloau, for example, is sort of dropping into the flat, which we saw him do last year. You're just trying to give the quarterback a different picture without making it super complicated on yourself, because we have seen, let's say the 2017 season, 2018 season, where Ohio State's defense, you could see the players out on the field kind of like scratching their heads and trying to figure out where they were supposed to go next. You don't want to make it complicated for yourself. You want to make it simple for yourself but complicated for the opponent. Having a Sonny Styles where you can, at various times, he doesn't have to play 70 snaps, but if he's playing 30 or 40 snaps, but 10 of them are in a safety kind of role and 10 of them are in a linebacker role, and maybe he's rushing the passer or whatever in 5-10 more, well, that's going to really give you a complicated picture, because it's not just like, okay, point, you always see the quarterback point out the mic. Okay, there's the mic. Okay, well, Sonny Styles, there's number 6. What is he doing? I don't know. That's kind of
By the time you find him, it's like the play clock is running out. I kind of view him as like a 10th defender in baseball or softball. Like, where do you need him for this particular batter? Just now, go do that. So.
I wanted to really quickly get the first comment that I've ever liked from Tony Gerdeman's Twitter account, which says, I wish I could pull up the live chat. It says, getting real tired of you guys putting out amazing content. Do you know how hard it is to do anything else other than watch every episode?
I mean, I know how hard it is.
We're actually there for all of them, so we're...
Plus, then I go back home and watch it.
Well...
I like to take notes, critique. Jerry Rice used to do this. Tony Gwynn does it.
Are you running up a huge hill while you do it? No? Then it's probably not exactly like Jerry Rice?
Your opinion. Let's see. What else did... You know what was interesting? After practice, there was a group of leaders. Like, I think it's the Leadership Council. Because it's Ryan Day and all the former captains and all the players that you would expect to be there. And also Gabe Powers.
That's interesting.
And Mitchell Melton was in there as well. It didn't surprise me as much. But Gabe Powers was in there. And unless he was just waiting until they were done to ask Ryan Day a question, I don't know. He may have been on the far side. But I thought that was interesting. And he was one of the guys who really stood out on Saturday to me in the red zone, and then also had a huge collision with Chip Trainum on a 4th down. So I asked Jim Knowles about him. I mean, he's playing well. He's obviously better than he was a year ago. This is his 2nd year. He was in for spring last year, along with C.J. Hicks. And I always feel like I bundle these two together because they're in the same class, same one's a weak side, one's a Mike linebacker. And so as I'm thinking about writing about them both, it's like, you know what? I'm just going to separate them now. And, Gabe is doing his own thing. CJ is doing his own thing, which we'll get to. But good to see. And Gabe Powers getting a ton of reps because no Tommy Eichenberg. So he's basically the number 2 middle linebacker now behind Cody Simon. And he's doing exactly what they'd hoped, which is making the most of it. And just, that was interesting to me. And again, he may have just been standing aside, like waiting, or maybe he's shadowing Tommy on like take your son to work day, that sort of thing.
Well, he was following Tommy Eichenberg around a bunch during practice because I have pictures of him and Tommy Eichenberg, and they're talking to James Laurinaitis. And I mean, yeah, that would make sense. Like, you're going to have the Mike guys together, so okay, sure. But this is a make the most of your opportunity thing where we've talked about that with the young wide receivers, where you got the 2 of the starting wide receivers out for the spring. There's a lot more reps to be able to potentially take advantage of. If you're Gabe Powers and you would normally maybe be the 3rd Mike. With Tommy Eichenberg out, okay, Cody Simon, take 1 step forward. Gabe Powers, take 1 step forward. And he kind of fits the profile of the guy who maybe overplays his ranking a little bit, where he was not, C.J. Hicks was the 5-star in that class, and then Gabe Powers was kind of the next guy in that, he was, what was he, a top 50? I think he was not quite a 5-star, but he was at least a top 50 at one point. But he is, the stereotypical son of a coach, right? I mean, his dad is the coach at Marysville High School. He played for his dad at Marysville High School. So, you're going to come in with a pretty good overall football knowledge, which generally is the kind of thing that will put you on the field a little earlier than you might otherwise be. And, this is a big spring for him because if you can, there are only 2 starting linebacker spots. And you've got 3 guys ahead of you who are all seniors. You got Steele Chambers, you got Tommy Eichenberg, you got Cody Simon, all ahead of you on that depth chart. But guess what? Guess what seniors do, Tony?
They get tired of being in school. They get this thing called senioritis.
Yes.
And then they go.
Yes, and then also they graduate sometimes. But sometimes they go to the NFL. But so this is a year for him where he's not gonna. I would be very surprised if Gabe Powers was starting this year.
Yeah.
But I would not be at all surprised if Gabe Powers was starting next year.
Yeah, and of course, Cody Simon could come back as well. They like their depth there.
Yeah.
One last thing on Sonny, because I don't know if I said this, but the quote from Jim Knowles is, "We're going to get him in." And then regarding Gabe Powers, also Knowles said that he's establishing the respect of his teammates, which is that's a big thing. Talking about CJ, because the subject of the Jack came up, and I guess Knowles confirmed the main reason there's no Jack this spring is because Mitchell Melton is out, and he is the guy. And Mitchell Melton is working in individual drills, and so he's going to be fine. And they just didn't want him doing any scrimmage stuff, so he'll be okay. But C.J. Hicks sounds like he's the backup to Mitchell Melton right now, because talking to Marcus Hartman, and then he I mean, that's what he said, because I wasn't over there and you were
Yeah.
busy with your cameras. But I like it.
Hmm. Well, and that's something you go back, what was it, January, when you asked him if CJ Hicks was going to be playing the jack, and he said, no, not really, no. And then all of a sudden the answer changed to yes. So I don't want to say they get all their good ideas from us, but many, I think, might be safe.
Well, let's see if this is a good idea. Let's see if it works first.
Before you take credit
Yeah.
for it. Yeah, sorry. Forget everything I just said, unless it works out well. But yeah, I think, we had sort of read between the lines on the Mitchell Melton thing, where Mitchell Melton felt like he was kind of really taking a big role with the team last spring. Jim Knowles was very, very happy about it. You heard a lot of positive things about Mitchell Melton, and then he blows his knee out in the spring game last year and misses the whole season. It feels like they are pretty confident that he's going to pick right back up where he left off, understand the defense a little better, because now he had another year to learn the defense and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think you can almost, not quite, but almost put him in ink in the depth chart as the starting jack this fall. And then how much is that going to play? And that's kind of an interesting question, too, because Knowles was asked about the jack position, and is that you have better athletes. This was asked a little more diplomatically than this, but you have better players here than you had at Oklahoma State and Duke. And Oklahoma State and Duke and places like that, you're just kind of making do with tweeners, and you're just kind of, it's just kind of like, all right, what's in the fridge? We'll throw something together for dinner kind of thing. You don't have to do that. You have all the finest ingredients in the world to work with here. Do you have to have the jack? Is that like a non-negotiable thing that you're going to have the jack here forever? And he said, no, nothing is non-negotiable at Ohio State. It is going to be the best, the best of whoever's out there. And it just, I think is, I expect to see the jack this fall. I think if they don't find a guy to replace Mitchell Melton after that, well, then that may change. What was interesting, though, was he was also asked about, 4 defensive linemen, 4 down linemen. Is that non-negotiable, or is that, could you potentially go to a 3-down system like a number of teams have done? And that sounds like, well, as long as Larry Johnson's here, that's fairly non-negotiable, which, again, this is sort of stuff being said out loud that we've sort of read between the lines on before. But, yeah, he said, he's the greatest defensive line coach there is. You're going to run his system, and as long as he's here, you're going to run that 4-down system.
And that 4 down, is the jack considered one of those 4? How often?
Yeah, well, that's a fun question,
Because
isn't it? Yeah.
I think the lack of depth at defensive tackle can be helped by having that jack.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have 2 defensive ends, a jack and a defensive tackle. You slide somebody inside, and if you find yourself that you're lacking, or you just need a couple of reps off for those guys, because they go 4 deep, and I don't know that they go beyond that right now. And actually 3 deep, if we're being honest. Mike Hall, Tyleek Williams, Ty Hamilton. Because right now, Jaden McKenzie has never played.
Mm-hmm.
Hero Canoe, it's still like 18 years old. So I think that's a way for them to maybe get through that, is the jack and maybe 3 defensive ends at a time sometimes. Like old school rushman package, old school from 3 years ago.
I was going to say that school's not very old, but yeah, and that's kind of what they've always done, is you take what in the rushmen they always used in a predictable passing situation. It's 3rd and 8. You're running on an extra defensive end. That was where you would see Chase Young lining up as an interior lineman, because they're not running a ISO on 3rd and 9 unless you're playing James Franklin, and then maybe, but you're in a very predictable passing situation. So, ready? Want to hear my Kirk Herbstreit impression? You can pin your ears back and rush the pass. Get after that quarterback.
Interesting. Do you have a pen on you? One last thing. So, as we mentioned, the safeties are where they are. Noel said that he likes them like that. That's where they're going to be. So, Josh Proctor as the free safety, adjuster, field safety, and Lathan Ransom on the other side. So that's where they are now. Should we get to some questions so we can?
We should.
Because I think we've mostly covered what.
Yeah, I think we've covered most of the stuff
my
we
notes,
needed.
anyways.
Yeah. All right, so we'll scroll back to the beginning. Tony, Fort Wayne Buckeye wants to know, do you think, or wonder anything new or different from your article yesterday after what you saw today?
No, mentally I'm spent. So I'm just going based on everything I said yesterday is still what I'm saying today. I do need to update my depth chart now that it's been a few days, and it won't look like I'm updating my depth chart based on what I saw on Saturday.
Sage Ohio says he loves how March Madness has to be scaring the CFP folks, where all the 1 seeds are home, all the 2 seeds are home, all the 3 seeds are home. They know soon with this 12 team, a 3-loss team will win the national championship. I don't know that I think that's true. I think you're going to have. I think there's football. You don't get the random upsets as much.
Plus, that 3-loss team is going to have to win a game on the road.
Right, and then you got to win a couple more, and I think it's going to be. You're going to get the whatever 8 seed, the 8 seed or the 7 seed who beats the 2 or whatever. You're going to get that, but I don't think you're going to get the.
You need something like a 2002 USC where they had gotten hot at the end. Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe, but that's a pretty steep hill to climb, more so than in basketball. Let's see, we've gone through here, just going through. A bunch of questions. Sonny Styles we answered. Would they use Evan Pryor like Paris Campbell?
They have talked about the comparison of Pryor's role to Xavier Johnson's role.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they were still feeling that out last year because that was more of a desperation thing with Xavier Johnson, and it worked. So it's like, gosh, that's where the humble foods, as you said, like that's where it becomes like now it's a sensation. Now you have restaurants based on the humble beginnings of Xavier Johnson may lead to more great dishes this year for the Ohio State offensive kitchen, Tom.
Chad Stryker says, in the film he's seen of practice, Dallin Hayden looks like a man on a mission. Is that coming through in practice for you guys too? I will say I put a bunch of photos up in our on our board at BuckeyeHuddle.com right after practice today, and the one that got by far the most comments was just one of Dallin Hayden just standing there. But everyone was saying like he looks so much bigger. He looks so, and that's kind of normal for a first year to second year. Like you've now had the full year with Coach Mick. You've gone through the full off-season program, all that kind of stuff. You've had a year in the nutrition program. That's where you typically will see a guy get bigger.
Yeah, I think he's like 10 pounds heavier, but also, stronger. That's the thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can gain 10 pounds.
But he did it a good way.
Yes, he did it a different way than. So that's but that runs us through our questions.
Oh, good. And this will be a good time to end it. I want to thank you all for joining us as always. We'll be back here Thursday, probably around the same time maybe a little bit later. We've got a bunch of defensive backs to get through. So, but around the same time on Thursday, we'll go live again to recap what we heard and saw. So I want to thank you all for joining us as always. Check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Say hello to us there. Also find us at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Thank you all, and we'll talk to you guys later.